Stop. With your feet on the air, your head on the ground. Try this trick and spin it. Yeah.
Hello, welcome to Framework. My name is Al Schwartz. With me, as always, is John Bernard.
Hello, it's me.
And joining us today is Gwen Sisco.
Hello.
And we are here today to talk about David Fincher's third film, Fight Club.
Fourth, I think you'll find.
Alien 7. Oh, yeah, the game. It's in there too.
Mhm.
Oh, man.
Al didn't like the game very much.
Yeah, I've already tried to block it out of my memory.
I need to rewatch the game.
But getting into Fight Club, let me dive in with this. I want to ask you guys a question.
Yes.
Is this a comedy or a drama?
It is a black comedy.
Yeah,
I
I
would
think
agree.
it's a comedy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would
Yeah.
agree. If I would put it on the comedy shelf in my, fictional video store. If we still had physical shelves with movies on them in our homes.
Well, it's a satire for sure, and satire usually implies comedy of some kind or another. There are very few satires that are not funny at all. They're even the bleakest of satires is kind of
There has to be some dark humor there.
Yeah.
It's a very specific subset of satire. I feel like, which is the sort of young white man has this sort of spiritual awakening, which leads to him lashing out against the consumerist values and general capitalist society thing. That I think you can track back to The Graduate as the earliest example of that in my head.
I mean, it's almost Catcher in the Rye has a little of that. Maybe it's
maybe to a degree.
Yeah, the angry young man. Yeah.
I'm thinking of if you're drawing a line through the decades of film, you got The Graduate in the 60s, the 70s. I don't know. I mean, you can make it. There's quite a few different possibilities, whether it's Clockwork Orange or Cuckoo's Nest. Network has some of the has some DNA that I think makes its way into Fight Club. In the 80s, you get Say Anything or Pump Up the Volume has got some of that into it. The one that I was thinking about that I actually watched recently that I think makes a fascinating counterpoint to this is Sorry to Bother You from a year or two ago.
Oh,
Mhm.
oh yeah.
And maybe we can circle back to that later. I think that's really interesting when you change the race of the protagonist, how that sort of flips the entire movie on its head.
Yeah, I would make the argument that Fight Club is a story that could only happen to a white man.
Yes, I think that's definitely the case.
Yep.
Maybe that's another question. Is this the whitest man movie ever?
Certainly not. No, there's way wider movies than this, but it's
Way wider? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you for an example.
Well, like a Merchant Ivory film, I suppose, but
Do
I
British
think,
costume dramas count? I mean, I don't know if that counts as the same way.
well, when you're talking about the specific pejorative, privileged white man, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I would think of American Beauty as
That's a good
wider
one.
than this one.
The
you
film
know?
that beat this at the Academy Awards. Of course, this wasn't even nominated. This was that year.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the same movie, just for a 40-year-old instead of a 30-year-old white man.
Similar themes for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
This was in the era in 1999 too, because wasn't Office Space around that time too?
It was. I mean, this and Office Space and The Matrix and a whole bunch of movies about
fuck the system, man.
snapping out of it and sort of rebelling against the American dream and what it's supposed to tell you to do.
Yeah, but that discontent is very specifically like white and male. Just
Hmm.
because, like, getting back to Sorry to Bother You, what's so interesting about that, I feel like it feels in a way like it's based on some sort of unpublished Chuck Palahniuk manuscript. It has the same sense of
Yeah,
escalation and
Hmm. And the same
exaggeration
kind of
to it.
absurdity.
Yeah.
and there's some left-hand turns in that one.
Oh yeah, there are. It's even wilder than this. It's funnier than this too. I mean, I think it's a fantastic movie.
It
But
is.
what's interesting about it is that it's when you look at the arc of Fight Club, um, it's about and comparing it to Sorry to Bother You. It's the protagonists are both sort of rebelling against this corporate culture that's dehumanizing in a lot of the same ways.
Hmm.
But the way that it comes, Fight Club comes at it is that the white protagonist is so secure in that environment that he has to like lash out against it and sort of flirts with or dabbles in anarchism and nihilism and
Right.
sort of in the very ending comes around to a slightly more conservative worldview of like, well, maybe just the punk rock fuck everything ethos is more empty than you would think, um, and settles down with a girl sort of and
For all we know, she could have walked out of that building, hopefully saying, "Honey, you need help. I'm gone. I'm not coming back."
There's a huge question of what the hell happens at the end of this, for
yeah,
sure. That the movie kind of brilliantly just leaves unanswered and gives you
Yeah.
this hilarious Hollywood shot. Anyway,
which
that's
is
the
which
ending.
is part of the tie back to The Graduate, I think. That ending in
Yes,
that state of uncertainty, like, okay, you succeeded in everything you set out to do, and then there's this like, now what moment at the end. And just to tie that back to what I was saying about Sorry to Bother You, the interesting counterpoint there is that because it focuses on a lower class black guy, the progression in that movie is that he has to sort of like fight his way into the corporate structure that's so dehumanizing, and then realize that you know that it is not everything. Yeah, that it's not what it promises to be, and sort of he works his way around to a more like anti-capitalist
Mm.
Project Mayhem esque viewpoint by the end of that movie.
that movie is literally dehumanizing. Actually,
Mhm.
that's
Yes,
that is like a Chuck Palahniuk book, really. Like it might be the second best, at least, Chuck Palahniuk adaptation, even though it's a book he never wrote. Uh, it's
I think they'd make great double features. That I mean, The Graduate for that. Sorry to Bother You for that whole racial dynamic. You could also I know Chuck Palahniuk's talked about it as sort of he viewed it what he was writing as sort of a male version of like the Joy Luck Club.
yeah, I
Or
can kind of see what he is getting at there.
Oh, I think I
um,
remember what you're talking about. And specifically, like, there are no places for men to like focus on their actual feelings.
or that there aren't films devoted to that.
Hmm.
He
yeah,
said there's Dead Poet Society, and then this was like the next one.
huh.
But there's it's like a whole subgenre of divine secrets of the Yaya sisterhood. There's traveling pants involved sometimes, and you
Right.
Well, that is kind of what the entire secret idea of Fight Club is that it's a place for men to be emotional, and that since they don't really have the vocabulary to be emotional in a way that doesn't involve kind of these aggro displays of domination and masculinity, it just kind of results in, okay, I guess we fight, and they beat the shit out of each other, and that's how it works. This is kind of,
know,
is this the
it,
beginning of the idea of toxic masculinity? I mean, it's not the beginning of the idea, but is this sort of when we start
No,
to
there was
define
no
that?
toxic masculinity until 1999.
And yes, thanks a lot, Fight Club. But
way to introduce this to society.
but is
But
this
I
where we
do
start to
think that
note
there
it?
weren't many films really talking about it before then.
No,
Yeah.
like I would be hard pressed to name one
It
actually.
certainly is reflected in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and toxic masculinity took this film and ran with it. And while I think the film's definitely trying to point out how toxic masculinity works, I don't think that's how it was received by
Yeah.
some
Yeah,
people.
Um,
fascinating that. Yeah. um, when I made Amanda watch this, she this was one of the few Fincher movies she'd already seen, and her main takeaway was like she remembered that there was a guy in college that she knew who really wanted to start his own fight club, and was like vocally trying to recruit people to do Fight Club with him, and I was like, wow, that sucks. That's
Really?
that's quite a misreading of this film. And yet, at the same time, watching it again, I'm kind of like, I understand why people took it the way they did. I understand why people got quote unquote the wrong message from this movie, because it is, he makes it appealing.
I mean, yeah, I felt that there were certainly points, when they have, what is it, some politician or some cop by the balls, and they're saying, we're the ones who are doing your dishes and making your food. Don't piss us off. Don't fuck with us. Like, the little baby socialist in me is like, yeah, don't fuck with us. We'll fuck you up. And I get really excited by those things. But then in the next moment, he's also taking his hands off the wheel and asking, what's the big deal about that we should all be letting go while we're
Yeah, but I mean,
in cars.
and it's amazing how like I didn't see how much I didn't see this stuff when I saw this as a teenager, but now that seems like so heavy-handed to me. Like how it couldn't be more obvious that the sort of like letting go and that Tyler is preaching, like it's a literal car wreck.
Yeah.
It's a car crash. It's not an answer to anything. It's at best a starting point.
That's really where Project Mayhem loses me, where you're voluntarily getting into a car crash.
Any group or organization that requires a specific haircut of me is where I start to get antsy.
I mean, I'm good with all the like destroy corporate art and stuff like that. That's fun, I'm enjoying all that when it's sort of low stakes.
Well, you're supposed to. It's supposed to be seductive.
That mission that we lost Bob.
Yeah. Oh.
Poor Bob.
We have a moment for it to just talk about how great Meatloaf is in this movie.
It's the Meatloaf performance of note.
Yeah. Well, I've never actually seen Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh,
sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah,
we're gonna have to make you watch that and then talk about it. It'll be fun. You won't know what the hell it is. You'll be mad. It'll be great.
I wouldn't say that one is really like a Meatloaf vehicle, though. He makes his appearance and it's delightful.
I know he's in it. I assume he has like a big song number, because why else would you have Meatloaf in your movie?
One big song, yeah. But no, Tim Curry is the one you'll recontextualize, and maybe Susan Sarandon.
Well, I'm familiar with Frankenfurter and Tim Curry. Maybe it's peak Susan Sarandon, and that might change some stuff there. I don't know.
Not a peak.
We're getting kind of far afield.
We are.
Let's go back to the beginning of the movie a little bit, because
yes.
And going back to what you were talking about earlier about how it is sort of this emotional space, the Dead Poet Society angle to it. Like, it is not a coincidence that Fight Club becomes structured a lot like the support groups that the narrator is going to in the earlier parts of the film. Where it's like, I look around at this group and I see a lot of brave people or whatever. There's some line like that at the beginning of the movie in one of the support groups. And then, Tyler Durden saying, I look around, I see in Fight Club the bravest and the best men that have ever lived, or something like that. And it's the same type of affirmation, but with a more toxic masculinity injected.
I do think that the reason that a lot of people get sold on Project Mayhem watching this, certainly as a 90s teenager might, for example, is that a lot of the things that are bothering Edward Norton in the first 15 minutes of this movie are so relatable, are so extremely like viscerally understandable, and they're not points that frequently get made, if ever. Certainly not in big Hollywood movies. Just sort of being frustrated with social expectations of yourself, and the appeal of decoupling yourself from this social idea of who you should be and what will make you happy. It feels like that it's such a provocative idea to encounter, especially young. The bit that always gets me is early on the thing about IKEA, where he's talking about like which ottoman best defines my personality, that sort of thing. I feel like that buys so much that buys him so much latitude to kind of rebel against, because it's relatable. Like it's every time I go to IKEA, it's the exact things that are running through my head. I'm just like, okay, which
Yeah.
one? Yeah, that's
But this
such
goes
a
back to what we were saying. Like, it's even though Tyler is ultimately the antagonist here, like and Project Mayhem is a villainous concept in the end of the movie, it still like needs to be seductive to at least a certain type of angry white
Mhm.
guy, and it's effective that way because he's not wrong about every single thing. He leaps to a lot of pretty insane conclusions from it.
Mhm.
I would say that most of Tyler's message throughout the movie is perfectly like valid. I think anytime somebody is trying to identify with their furniture, as like he says at one point that he was almost complete because he had the right sofa, and that's obviously a giant mistake to make in terms of how you visualize yourself. But from top to bottom, this movie seems to be talking about psychologically trying to grasp like who we are and not using the products we consume to do that.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing that is that sort of underpins every revolutionary idea in this, and that is, it's hard to shake that off, because that is 100% true. That's a thing that we do need to reckon with, and
But
maybe even more so now than 20 years ago. Yeah.
I would say he essentially he trades in IKEA and that apartment for Tyler and a whole other false identity that is,
Yes.
Yeah, I
you
mean
know,
that's the genius thing about the Project Mayhem conceit in the novel and the film is that
One ideology for another.
yeah,
mhm,
it is just as constrictive, if I mean way more so. That there's
certainly.
uniforms, there's haircuts. You have no name. Like as much as he's railing against being a nameless, like faithless
Yeah.
consumer in the first half of the movie, the members of that organization in the second half of the movie are just as explicitly nameless.
Mm.
So yeah, this is great. I mean, this is and it's the sort of thing that the appeal of punk rock culture, for just as a catch-all for what they're doing here is that rejection, and it's there is a freeing feeling in rejecting shit,
Mm.
certainly rejecting mainstream shit. That gives you kind of the illusion of making a major choice, and and unshackling yourself, and that is the emotional uh, feel of it, and that is why I think that this movie inspires people to make real fight clubs, or or to search somewhere for that feeling of individuality. I guess that that results in, I don't know. Can you draw a line directly to QAnon from this?
Absolutely.
You
Or at
can.
least the Proud Boys or any other incel group
Yeah.
who are
Yeah,
women. Women.
there's something that I think the movie's great about is that it hits on the essential truth there of that tension between longing for individuality and identity that way, and then also like connection and identity through a group or a larger cause, and that how those end up in tension because no matter how much you're trying to rebel from society, like you end up in this subculture that is somehow even like smaller and more restrictive. You're in punk rock or you're a goth or whatever, and again, like the dress code is more restrictive than it is going into the office.
Mm.
And of
I think
primary importance. Yeah.
also the like what pushes him there is what's really interesting to me, because he's from the very beginning he's saying that he's uh dealing with insomnia and psychological pain, and he tries to ask a doctor for help and the doctor just shuts him down and says, you don't know what pain is, go see the men with testicular cancer. And then he actually is able to like sit and express the pain that he's in. And it's just this whole thing where men aren't allowed to do that. And so it feels really good to have physical pain when you're in psychological distress.
Yeah, you know what? It hadn't occurred to me until you just said that now that, of course, he goes to testicular cancer first because it's what he's like struggling with is emasculation and trying to figure out like what it means to be a man in this, particular strata of society at this point in time and feeling like he's not a real man.
Mm.
Man, these support group scenes in the beginning of this film are
I love
what a
it so
tightrope.
much.
Yeah.
What a
Chloe is like my favorite character in the movie.
Oh, it's that bit is so good.
it is. I mean, this is the most black comedy stuff in the film, in my opinion, because this stuff is funny. Is the thing, like these scenes are funny, and at the same time, it's not exactly. I don't know, like
It's not like punchlines,
yeah,
like laugh
you
lines
know,
exactly.
like it's such a you don't want to just laugh at these people, that doesn't want to be the way you feel about this, like Chloe or Bob. Bitch tits, I remember when I was a teenager, bitch tits was really funny. It's less funny now, it's more of a really sad state of affairs, but it has that kind of, it's so sad that it's funny again kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it resonates with something true in us, especially in 1999. There was this sort of, in the late 90s, there was a rise of this sort of black comedy and this saying things that we're not supposed to say. And Chuck Palahniuk and I don't know if it's a Fincher thing. It's definitely a Chuck E.P. thing to say the things bluntly that we're all kind of thinking and are uncomfortable with, and saying them out loud is, creates that sort of nervous, fun laughter.
Yeah, Palahniuk's definitely more of a provocateur. He's intentionally transgressive in a way. Fincher's a little too reserved for that to be a hallmark of his going forward. But it is like this. I think part of the reason why like this and Seven are so much better than Alien 3 in the game, just to keep it to what we've looked at so far, is that the humor is more pronounced in this and Seven.
Brad Pitt.
Also Brad Pitt. I mean, this is like peak Brad Pitt.
Yeah, in every way. God, he's good in this. It's
Yeah.
it's a tremendous performance. It's exactly what the film needs, and yeah, it makes all the sense when like in both versions of it. I mean, once you figure out that he is indeed a projection of the main character, it everything about his performance that maybe didn't seemed a little like a little too perfect, all of a sudden really clicks in. It's a hell of a piece of work by Pitt and by Fincher in the way he uses him. I think real movie star work.
Oh, totally. I mean, it calls for an absolute movie star performance in a way that very few roles do so explicitly.
And it's fun to kind of imagine, because he is a projection of Jack's mind, or whatever you want to call Ed Norton's character. Like, of course, if you're trying to imagine like this person that you wish you could be, of course it's Brad Pitt. Yep. I mean, I don't know about you guys.
Yep.
I would probably even pick Brad Pitt.
I mean, in 1999, Brad Pitt was at some insane, superhuman peak of like physically speaking. And he was just,
I think there's something to, I think the actor himself, like he's smart enough to know that like he is this role, and it's just really a meta moment, especially when he's talking about we're all pissed off that we couldn't be movie gods and rock stars and
underwear models.
That's exactly what you are.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what the conceit does. That's great is that even when what seeming inconsistencies in the character, that like they can scoff at the underwear ad on the bus, but he is it goes directly from that to the sort of iconic shot of him with the the V thing and the V crotch. Yeah. They've got a disgusting word name for it, which I don't want to say because I can't say it without laughing because it's disgusting, but actually kind of clever. Yeah. But
we all know
the beautiful torso. We know what you're saying.
But that he, it seems inconsistent that he's like rejecting all the consumerist stuff and the surface stuff, and like somebody who's really rejecting that superficiality society would probably look like more of a schlub, you know.
Well,
Would
I mean
A
that's
little
the
bit
thing.
more like Ed Norton.
Yeah, it's Edward Norton
well,
actually saying
Edward
that.
Norton is an everyman like milk toast. I'm saying somebody who really rejects like Western body image types. Like you might have more of a Jack Black. Um,
Jack Black could have played Tyler Durden. It wouldn't have made sense, but
in a more comedy, yeah,
actually,
in a
that
more
would be
musically
funny.
oriented version of Fight Club. Yeah.
I love that Tyler Durden.
Um, yeah, but it makes sense eventually that the narrator himself is not able to like break out of the like as much as he's consciously rejecting them. That's still his ideal that's embedded in his head that he can't
Right.
like
And
get away from.
to some extent, I would say that it has to be a direct response to Marla. Like it couldn't
Marla.
have been a Jack Black because
Right.
it needed to be somebody who could match Marla.
Mm-hmm.
What do
All
you?
right, before we get to Marla, because I want to talk about Marla, the support group thing. This created a very interesting director feud. Did anyone hear about this? The Paul Thomas Anderson David Fincher feud over Fight Club.
And what,
No,
Magnolia?
please.
Paul Thomas Anderson hates Fight Club and has publicly gone on record saying it's an irresponsible evil film, and that he
All right.
and he said that he wishes David Fincher would get testicular cancer,
Well, that's just
because of how shitty he felt about the opening scenes making fun of it in Fight Club.
Oh, that's his main complaint, that he thinks Fincher is making fun of cancer?
Yes, that is one part of it. I mean, he thinks the whole film is yes, abhorrent. That it inspires real life shit.
Well,
which
this is
all are
coming
kind
from.
of does.
I don't know. I don't
it's
appreciate
okay.
some of P.T. Anderson's decisions about. I don't know. I'm just still mad at the Phantom Thread. I'm really mad at that movie.
Oh, I didn't make it to the Phantom Thread.
I like the Phantom Thread.
He's.
You're allowed.
I've just been falling off the PTA train since pretty much Boogie Nights.
Really? Not even There Will Be Blood? That was the peak, and then it was all downhill.
I think There Will Be Blood is a very good movie and also one of the most overrated movies that ever existed.
A little bit of both, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
and
that
then
was just a fun
The Master
thing.
and Inherent Vice. I struggled to get through both of them.
The Master's okay. I'm sorry. Sorry to bring that up.
That's all right. We're talking about a lot of other movies in this. I mean, I was doing that too. Actually, I want to go back to what Gwen was saying about like when you're talking about Tyler has to be a match for Marla, and like
Marla.
in what way did you mean that?
Well, I said I don't have like theories, but the one thing that I have clung to ever since I first started getting obsessed with this movie back in college was he says in the very beginning of the movie that this all began because of Marla.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that. And it's interesting because I just think that, he goes to these meetings because the only way he can sleep is if he can exercise some of the pain he's feeling by crying. And then this woman shows up and takes that away from him. And I think he's simultaneously, like many of the incels who seem to love this movie, wildly attracted to her, and hates her for having this power that he doesn't have. And I think as he's attracted to that, he needs to sort of create an identity who can actually seduce her and who can be just as wild and reckless as she is.
So you're saying that Durden personality is created as a response to what he sees in her.
I do think that, we see Fincher puts in those tiny blips of Tyler from the very beginning before he's ever met Marla.
Yeah, we see him in The Office, I think.
Developing in his unconscious for sure. I don't know how active Tyler is yet, but I don't think he becomes completely active until they meet. And I think that happens right after he meets Marla, because
Mhm.
he needs to figure out how to get close to her.
Yeah,
And
I
he's a
think that makes
catalyst.
sense.
Mhm.
That he sees in her like somebody who obviously feels a lot of the same things that are driving him to those same meetings under the same
Hmm.
false pretenses, but who seems to have. I mean, for as much as Marla is sort of a suicidal wreck, I guess,
Mm.
in their at least their initial interactions, she seems to be much more comfortable with like why she's there and what she's getting out of it and just her role in the world and her sort of insouciance to how polite society might view her.
Well, she has that same sadness that he has, and I mean, she maybe have she may have a better handle on it, or maybe she doesn't, and it's just that we're inside Norton's head more.
Right.
I mean, she's being driven to support groups for diseases she doesn't have,
And
which
she
is the
walks in
exact
front of traffic like it's no big deal. Like
Mhm.
I
yeah.
think, I think the narrator says at some point that she wants to die. Um, Although
I'm
when her suicide attempt happens, she says it's just a cry for help.
Yeah, I love that. Uh, it's I mean, in a sense, she kind of functions in a similar way, I would say, to the well, I mean, I don't want to call her a manic pixie dream girl, even though she has some of the signifiers, maybe a manic goblin dream girl or something like um
Whatever Fincher's version of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl
yeah.
is.
Yeah, I mean,
But she
it's
is a
not
manic
really
dream. She's a manic depressive dream girl. How about that?
I, it's not that's dismissive though of what I think is an incredibly well written and performed character
Yeah.
in
Helena
its own
Bonham
right.
Carter is fantastic in this performance.
Oh my god.
It's really
Yeah.
hard to imagine somebody else in this role.
This like no lie, this started a gigantic crush for me on Helena Bonham Carter. This is foundational. You know, I've kind of always just loved her ever since this film. As a result of this film, I mean, to the extent that I don't know, like Bellatrix Lestrange. I'm just like, oh well, that's one of the sexiest things ever, And then people was like, what are you talking about, man? And I was like, what?
To each
No, just
their
me.
own.
I was biting my tongue trying to hold back like a mocking thing of like you're just saying this because it's a more socially acceptable thing than admitting that Bellatrix Lestrange gave you a very strange boner.
Her performance here is wonderful. It's it really it works in two different ways at once, where she's kind of the person Norton thinks she is until you realize that there is no Tyler Durden, and then she's just this sad
Mm.
person with very low self-esteem, and the bravado is a coping mechanism, and it all tracks.
Hmm.
She's so good in this.
Yeah, she's even
Um,
Yeah.
more damaged than we realized
yeah.
when you that penny drops.
One of
Hmm.
Um,
the things that like I think makes everybody love this movie is how much better it is the second, third, fourth time you watch it. Like
mhm.
it's just so chock full of little things to discover. And her whole performance, every single time I watch it, I notice a tiny subtlety that's in there that of her actually really trying to connect with this man who is
Yeah, it's so
oh
sad.
Yeah, it's not like she's chasing him. I mean, she's kind of chasing him around, but it's not like she's completely blind to it. Like you can see her like make little efforts and then shut down when they get shot down, and like she'll storm
yeah.
out a couple times, uh, and her confusion, I guess, is easier to see in future viewings.
Right. And the first time you watch it, her confusion just reads as like that bitch is cray. But
Yeah,
Hmm.
you realize that
because
it's
that's what like the narration is telling us too. Like he's narration
exactly.
is very nasty to her,
He's
especially like the first half of the
terrible.
movie.
But what's really interesting, I had forgotten how sincere his apology seems to be when he
Yeah.
starts to figure out what's going on. Like I think I forget that because so many people again take this movie and run with the let's kick ass and blow shit up, and they forget that like he seems to feel really bad about all of it.
Yeah. Also, somehow to me, for as much like as big as the twist is in this like movie's identity and its memory, for some reason, the most forgettable part of this movie to me is the stretch between like when he finds out, uh, when he like realizes the twist, and then the very ending. And that's the part where the apology and everything falls into. And then it seems like all of a sudden there's like a bunch of plot to get through, where he's running around trying to like counteract what his alter ego has already done. Um, and that's not as interesting as the sociological screeds and fist fights earlier in the movie. I would say, because I mean, obviously we're not playing coy about what the twist is here.
No, everyone knows. Did everyone figure this out when they first saw it? This one blindsided me first time through.
No, this is. I mean, I speaking for myself. No, because we were not developed movie twist brains or eyes at this point.
Right. It was still pretty early on.
This is a few months after Sixth Sense came out, if I recall.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It was. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I had seen like Usual Suspects had happened.
Yeah.
And that was the first like, oh my God, you just blew my mind.
We talked about this in the game episode too. That I was saying that movie it's got a big twist ending too, and that my concern there is it seemed like we were going to lose David Fincher to like the 1990s big twist fad, because between Seven in the game and this, there's like 3 pretty big twist endings in a row.
Yeah. Instead, we lost him to like just gritty novel adaptations.
Some of those are good.
Yeah, it's some of his best. I mean,
no.
Well, no. I mean, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button is a pretty gritty novel, but I would say this and Gone Girl are both 2 of his best.
I guess this is a gritty novel adaptation. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think of this as an Airplane book. I guess that's a pejorative in my mind.
Yeah, it's not a potboiler type of thing.
But like Girl with a Dragon Tattoo.
That's the shit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's one I haven't seen. So
I also haven't seen it. So yeah,
I've seen it. It's fine.
But so, what I wanted to say about the twist here is this has got the imaginary friend twist is like my least favorite thing in the world. I hate it so much. It's just total bullshit in my mind.
But it's good in this one, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's always like a exception that proves the rule. And this is a movie that is entirely about that thing, and there wouldn't be this novel or movie without that. There's no version of it. I mean, I hate it when it's like in a serial killer movie, and then it turns out it's somebody with like you could do a serial killer movie without involving this nonsense about multiple personalities. Which,
right?
I mean, I don't know if either of you guys know anything about dissociative personality disorder. My understanding is it's about 50,000 times more rare in the general populace of humanity than it is in airport novels and movies and TV shows.
Yeah, I mean and I have a preliminary understanding of dissociation identity disorder, but I do think from what I do understand about it, this does a good job of showing how dissociation works. And so many of the symptoms he's complaining to the doctor about in the very beginning of the movie with his insomnia and the way he feels all day is a result of he's starting to dissociate.
One of the most unhelpful doctors unsympathetic, like worst bedside manner that I've ever seen.
But I think it's not an uncommon thing for there to be doctors that tell you to just get over it because they presume it's a psychological issue, and that's what we should do with psychological issues. Get over it.
Probably more common in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Too, than today's world. We're more sensitive about such things. But I mean, okay, so up to a point that it might be, but I don't think the way that dissociative personality sort of manifests in the real world is that you got people who are flying around the country trying to like having one personality trying to thwart the schemes of the other personality.
I mean,
that sort of becomes more of an airport novel plot, more ass.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I would prefer dream logic. Is how I'd say. It just sort of has an emotional truth to it,
right?
Rather than
I don't think this movie is meant to be taken literally.
No, that's that satire we were talking about. All Palahniuk's stuff that I've read anyway. Uh, and granted, I haven't read any of his stuff in quite a long time, but I went on a tear after Fight Club came out, and they all seem to operate in this heightened world of it's clearly like literary. Like people are not acting like human beings; they're acting out uh, thematic ideas.
Yeah, I mean that's true. They're very they're oddly told. Every single one of them seems to just change into a different thing. Every 60 pages or so, something like that. I mean that's a big part of why Sorry to Bother You feels like that. Really, it's
Right.
it's. I think nobody has really been able to crack it except David Fincher in this film. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they haven't tried that much. There are not too many Palahniuk adaptations, or maybe they're just not springing to my mind because they're not successful.
I think they're pretty hard, and we should give credit
Yeah,
to the screenwriter Jim Oles
hell of a job.
for
Yeah.
cracking it because it is hard. You're right. That is the thing that Palahniuk's books shares that, and it's kind of exciting in a way that they seem to like get bored with the concept every 50 pages or so, like you said, and jump on to the next thing. So you've got in Fight Club, you've got the support group thing for a while, and then it becomes the Fight Club thing for a while, and then it becomes Project Mayhem for a while, and then it becomes the uh, alternate personality thing
Mm-hmm.
for the end. But it's this progression of insanity.
Yeah, and a bad version of that is Choke. That's the one I'm thinking of. The Sam Rockwell film is sort of it's all those things, for a while, and then it turns into something else, and it's the disgusting protagonist that is somewhat compelling anyway. That it's almost like a parody of Chuck Palahniuk, and so is the book. Honestly, it's not a very good book either.
Oh,
But,
that was from my recollection. Again, it's been 15 years since I've picked any of these up, but that was the one I liked best after Fight Club.
Really, wow. I liked Lullaby. Anyway,
I think yeah. Well, it doesn't matter, but it does. I think it's testament to how hard it is to do
Yes.
that because you get it a little bit wrong, and all of a sudden, like these very different acts of the movie feel way more episodic and mashed together more arbitrarily. And here, like it's between the screenwriter and Fincher, they weave in these parallels very well. Like I said, the structure of Fight Club sort of being this dark mirror of the support groups, down to like at the beginning, he's at the support group with his face in Bob's tits and he's crying, and then later at Fight Club, he's getting choked out by Bob with his head between his tits and like crying again. But they come out of those meetings like with the same sense of catharsis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the thing. It's chasing a place to feel emotions, a way to express themselves in some way, and they've been conditioned to think that that fighting is this purest possible way of doing just that, and that is how it ends up.
They've been conditioned, I think, simultaneously to think that, and then also to repress it.
Yeah,
That's something in the sort of like white collar milieu that at least that the narrator comes out of. They have to repress that, and that's kind of funny that the Project Mayhem people, for the most part, seem to be coded as more working class, and they're in the service industry, like the most of them.
yeah.
Holt
Or office
McAnally's character
drones.
is just
Yeah.
the mechanic, but
He's great. Yeah, Holt McAnally showing up again.
yeah,
It's
he's really good in
him in
this.
all these. Yeah, he is good in this.
He's got, I think, maybe the funniest part of the movie. I mean, the part where they're all supposed to pick fights with strangers is great, and him picking the fight with a priest is one of my biggest laughs in this movie.
Yeah,
Where he throws the Bible down and then sprays the Bible with the hose instead of the priest. That's hysterical to me.
Do you ever wonder, like, that the very first dude to ask to join the fight, like right when they don't actually have a club yet, like who's that guy who sees what must be Ed Norton kicking his own ass in a parking lot and is like, "Can it be my turn next?" And it's like,
Do you want to?
It's a conceit.
Do you want what I think like Palinek's answer would be, or what I think a more plausible answer would be?
I mean, I'm just curious about what that moment must have actually been like. But do tell me what.
I think in the like writer's view of it, it's more like the guy we see who's in a suit who like raises his hand to ask, "Can I be next?" Um,
Hmm.
Clearly, that guy is not the first guy because that's Brad Pitt's fighting another guy who's not Edward Norton before that. But I think a more plausible scenario to my mind is a bunch of drunk guys come out of that bar, see him kicking his own ass, like over, you're like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "Man, just fucking around here." And then some drunk guy's like, "The hell, man, I'll beat you up if you want me to. get some of my rage out too, or whatever." It's like,
Yeah.
"I'll help you
Well,
out.
and
You don't."
it's like walking in on somebody self-harming and then being like,
I thought
"How'd
you
you
were
get
going to say
in here?"
masturbating.
Well,
I mean, in a sense, it's almost. I mean, a
Well, that's what Fight
masturbatory
Club's sort of
act.
both.
Yeah. Yes. I think the Palahniuk argument would be that the problems that are troubling Edward Norton, whatever we're calling that character, are not isolated to Edward Norton. That these are natural problems that are a reflection of the society.
for
That
sure.
everyone's freaking out about IKEA,
Yeah.
defining who they are as a person. So they need this outlet. There is a market for this outlet as a result, and that's why it catches on, and that's why the whole ball gets rolling. Is
Hmm.
Yeah,
because
I
it
mean
is a
that's in the
response.
voiceover explicitly,
Yeah,
where he
well,
says that it was on the tip of everyone's tongue. Tyler and I gave it a
there you go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
name. But do we want to talk about incels for a bit?
Always.
Um,
Speak for yourself. Ugh.
I
They
mean,
love this movie, though, don't they?
oh,
God.
they absolutely do, and I think that's actually one of the things this movie is. What that makes this movie great is that it saw incels coming in a way. It didn't see them clearly the way that that they would pan out, but
Hmm.
it saw the issues there. And actually, it just drives me back to another movie that I think would be an interesting um, double feature with this. There's another movie I watched recently, which is Taxi Driver. Um,
Yeah.
and when I watched
Yeah.
that 2 weeks ago, I was struck by how this is an incel movie. Um,
Mm. Hmm.
before we had a word for that, but
Oh, big time. Yeah.
that and Fight Club are about these like lonely, isolated white guys that feel like failures largely because they are unsuccessful romantically and are unable to create a family, and so they develop this anger and a sort of misogyny, uh, and also this sort of savior complex. The difference being with Taxi Driver, it's a loner incel. It's somebody who's going to become a shooter. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, a mass shooter. He does become a mass shooter before we had that term, unfortunately, as one that we all recognize. And then Fight Club is more about the like them forming their own community, and then that
Mhm.
Project Mayhem becomes the Proud Boys. And I think that's what's interesting is like it. I think Fight Club diagnoses like the issues, and then the disease takes this very different turn. Like what it gets wrong, I think, is that it sees that the anger that these guys have when they join a community, like that, it would sort of be captured by this more left wing, like Occupy Wall Street vibe. Uh, would be where they would be channeling their rage and frustration. And then,
Right.
as we've seen in real life, it seems that the right wing, racist uh, and misogynistic stuff was way more successful at capturing that rage and channeling it into acts of public violence.
This does feel like I don't know, a harbinger, I guess, of some things that are going to happen. Groups that are going to coalesce online, that sort of thing. what's interesting to me is that this film, there's that one scene, where they talk about maybe maybe the last thing we need is more women.
Right. That's
You
the
know,
only line in the whole thing
yeah,
that really, really drives me nuts, because he says, we're a generation of men raised by women. And like, as opposed to fucking what, Tyler? In the past 100 years, you've all been, it's not like, you're being sent out as child soldiers anymore. What? I don't.
well, I think it's wrong. I mean, it's an
Yeah,
incorrect emotion. Like it's that is kind of the only moment that reads on its face as misogyny.
Well,
Uh,
that and the fact that we never see a single woman try to join this club. It's not in the rules that it's
mm,
just men. We've heard the rules 100 times, and they never say, like, no girls allowed. But I can't believe that at no point any woman or non-binary person wouldn't come in there. They say no shirts, they don't say no bras.
that's true. And they let Bob wear a shirt
Yeah.
they do, yeah.
because they still,
So,
for as much as they're rejecting like mainstream values and hang-ups or whatever, they still have like the Western society hang up on nipples.
That is the thing. Like that is actually something that is avoided, I guess, in the movie. Like what would the reaction if a girl wanted to come to Fight Club be?
yeah.
That's not a door that is opened here. I mean, my assumption is that they would not allow it.
Right.
Well,
Well, and they avoid even dealing with it by sort of
Yeah,
going with the presumption that, like, why would a girl want this?
yeah, that's a good point.
well, they do, and I think it's kind of
Girls are allowed
necessary
to cry.
because if you allowed women into Fight Club, I don't think it becomes Project Mayhem.
I mean,
Like it
uh,
has to be some of that feedback loop of just these same type of guys feeding on their shared anger and just red pilling each other out into unrecognizable absurdity.
yeah, I try to imagine what a little bit of estrogen, more than Bob's anyway, would do for that group.
I think it would prevent there being a third act of this movie, even in fairly small doses, or they would
I-
be drummed out rather quickly. I mean, you could have gone down that road, I guess, but
well, yeah, I mean, there could be a large contingent of Fight Club that's like that. They're not here for the right reasons, kind of bullshit.
Right.
Like they're fake Fight Clubbers. They're tourists.
oh yeah,
Or what-
Or they would just get turned
no,
into, those girls in, I think about pro wrestling and like the girls
Mm,
who hold up the scorecards, like that
hmm
kind of shit. Mm.
yeah, or the girls who wrestle who are mostly there to be sexy. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and fight other girls and
Although I do appreciate
pillow
that,
matches.
like, despite the fact that Tyler seems to be probably a misogynist, he is like kind of a consent king, because he's like, when someone says stop, you stop. I like that.
yeah. Well, he's all about consent when it comes to men fighting men.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the movie does avoid showing explicit misogyny, though. Like it's not, it doesn't have these people ranting about women most of the time.
No, it's really just that one line.
Yeah. And that
And they are just as mad at men as they are at women,
It's inherent to everything, though. I think that this is important. Like, I don't think we see many wedding rings at Fight Club. My assumption is that these are all single men.
Oh, really? I don't know.
I don't know either. It's
And divorced men.
By the time he's like in the police office and everybody there is like, we got your back, sir.
yeah.
I
Well,
have a
it turns into
feeling.
ecstatic reality. Yeah.
I think those detectives are all divorced. Probably twice apiece. I mean, and it's also key to the end of him like getting over this thing and rejecting what he started is that he finally sort of gets a girlfriend. I mean, he's like ready to settle down.
I would say there's something to that. I do think that, like, the characters, there might be married men in Fight Club, but probably not happily married men. Probably
Oh,
not people.
none of those men are happy men.
Yeah. Like
You don't
anyone
go to
who's
Fight Club because your life is,
in
stable.
a secure
Yeah.
thing, who has somewhere to, express themselves or relate to somebody else, then the Fight Club does not have power
Yeah,
over them. You know?
I don't think any of the first wave Fight Club guys are. Maybe by the time it's a national thing, there's people who are joining it just because it's like the Elks uh, or the Shriners in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like everybody else. Like when he goes to that restaurant and the entire uh, kitchen staff is chanting his name is Robert Paulson. Like
Oh,
one or two of those guys might be like married or have a girlfriend and just be kind of like, well, like, you know, I wanted to keep in touch with my frat brothers after we graduated, and now they're getting into this. I don't know. But I mean, I think there's probably some gay men in Fight Club, but I don't think there's any gay men in Fight Club that are in committed long-term relationships. I just think if you're in a long-term relationship, the isolation required to make a Fight Club so attractive and Project Mayhem especially being something you want to throw your whole life into, it's just not there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I that's the thing. I think it's men who feel alone, men who feel let down by the world, by other people, by any relationships they have had up to that point, or having not had relationships, however it may be. It's people who feel like square pegs in a round hole, kind of in their whole life. And as it turns out, there's millions of them, all over.
And I think that's an unfortunate reality that we all have to live with now, is that there is a generation or two of men that have come up with these sort of conflicting ideas that your worth as a man is all about whether you're successful romantically or
financially, or just some form of alpha dominance,
and if you're not successful in this one area, you have to like channel in this other area. And then what I think Fight Club gets right about the sort of whole incel movement is that it becomes especially toxic and like spiraling into worse and worse forms when that becomes sort of like a cornerstone of your identity. That it's like, I think the one of the sadder things about the incel movement is, from the little bit of research I've done into it, is that you have these people that came together because like they felt really sad about this aspect of their life where they felt like they were failures, and they find some comfort in talking to other people who have the same issue, and then but then it becomes like this part of their identity. Yeah. And so it's something they're mad about that they don't get, and then when they do have an opening to maybe make a connection with somebody or maybe like be successful in that, there's like an element of self-sabotage that comes into it then, because then you want to, like, if you fuck it up or drive off anybody who's potentially interested, then it reinforces the identity you've constructed for yourself. And at least then you don't have to like admit you were wrong about anything you were mad about. And I think
people hate that.
When you look at Norton and Marla's relationship through that lens, you can see her sort of pushing her away in that sense.
Well, it's just so interesting to me that like so much of the argument of the incel seems to be this resentment that the good guy doesn't get the girl, and it's the bad boy who does. And it makes sense to me that the narrator's character is feeling that resentment until he realizes that they are one and the same, at which point like that argument doesn't work anymore, because you're
that's
both
what he's actually
the good
apologizing
guy. Yeah, and she doesn't want you when you're being a dick. Like she says, sometimes you're interesting and great in bed, but you're too much of an asshole for me. I don't want this. And then he starts being nice, and that seems to work a little bit better.
It does.
I don't know. It's
I do love the little like Norton's little reaction when she says he's great in bed. Like he's like kind of like initially happy with it, but then like
himself and
is not quite sure. Like, am I pleased with myself, or is this really like? This is not myself, but it is myself.
Right. I mean, it's
very
gotta be
quickly,
a little bit disappointing to find out that like you've had mind-blowing sex with Helena Bonham Carter and you don't remember it.
Yeah.
With those gloves.
The rubber glove. Yeah.
And I
I
love that
love
shot
those
of
gloves.
where it pans up from sex and he's like having sex and he's like, wait, am I having sex? That sort of the montage. All those shots of him as Tyler or talking to himself or all those things that you see at that moment are comedy gold, really.
Well, but going back to what Gwen was saying, I do think you're right that. But what I was saying about how that self sabotage aspect plays into it's before he realizes that he is Tyler, and I think it's part
Mhm.
of what delays that realization
Sure.
is that by the time he's like getting to the point where realizing that she's really interested in him and that there is something there, now like there is this whole other thing that's been built up, this whole other incel community of Fight Club and Project Mayhem, and to avoid putting those things in conflict, I think he extends that you know not making the realization.
Hmm.
I mean that's my read on it, uh, but it's a lot of outside stuff.
But there's certainly avoidance going on, I mean, probably blacking out, from stuff that is
Yeah.
inconvenient to be aware of. I mean, he definitely does that.
He
Certainly.
Yeah, and
literally
again, like the
dissociates.
specific rules of how the dual personality works, I'm kind of not too interested in this because I suspect they
No.
won't really hold together.
They won't.
Yeah, it's
I've thought about it so much. It won't.
yeah, and it has to become this satirical dream logic thing, where it's just sort of big ideas, where he is this cult leader all of a sudden. Like,
All over the
yeah,
country.
Yeah, and by the third act, it's just this thing of how like, oh, this ball I got rolling is now too big for me to stop,
Yeah.
and that's all of Project Mayhem, and it's Tyler. Eventually can just teleport around, and
But I'm
you can shoot him, and
interested.
it doesn't matter.
I'm
well,
interested in like the incels who have like claimed this movie for themselves. Do they think that Ed Norton's character, once he starts running around desperately trying to stop these things from happening and turn himself in and save Marla's life, do they think that he's like a beta cuck or something? Like,
it's an odd
Yeah.
thing. I probably. Um,
I,
it becomes like a movie thing, and I feel like this is maybe why people miss, that it's bad. That Project Mayhem is bad. Is it
Yes.
almost feels a little pat that all of a sudden there's good and evil in this, because Tyler Durden is right about some stuff, and he becomes a supervillain in the last act,
Sure.
and so he does that so Edward Norton can be the hero of the film, and I don't mind that per se, but it does simplify things a little bit, which is an odd thing to say about the end of this film because it's not simple. There's a lot of shit going on all of a sudden.
Right.
But in terms of sort of moral clarity, like it stops being complicated, I think.
yeah.
Well, it doesn't though because
no, I think I think that's where it gets more complicated. It's pretty simple when it's systems fucked up, man, and that's the whole of it. That's when it's simple to me.
But there's a good
Mhm.
guy and a bad guy all of a sudden.
Yeah, but they're the same person.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There is, I guess, there is a damsel in distress at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. That's the coding that all of a sudden, like, okay, so Tyler's the bad guy for sure now, which is when he's like, well, Marla's seen too much. When you hit that, you're just like, oh, okay, well, I know what we're in for now. Like it's going to be a fight for primacy, the good side and the bad side. And
But I can appreciate that, like, the bad guy is inside of you. Like,
yeah,
I don't think that I don't know. I would say that Fincher's trying to help us know that like we all possess a little tiny piece of this capability to turn into a Tyler Durden. Maybe not as successfully.
yeah,
yeah, but it's also that being Tyler Durden is bad, but it's not all bad.
No.
There's good parts about it.
Yeah, he's
Absolutely.
correct about some things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's certainly parts where he's being Tyler Durden's preferable to being Edward Norton.
Yeah, like that's the person that Helena Bonham Carter likes. That's the
I don't
version.
think it is.
No?
No, I think that's the part that feels comfortable with her.
That's a better way of saying it. Yeah. I mean, clearly, who he becomes ultimately, the quote unquote villain, is is trying to kill her. So yeah, that's probably not the part she likes.
Well, she's more drawn to the. I mean, I think she sticks around because Tyler is good in bed or whatever. But I think mainly she makes the efforts and sticks around more because the guy in the support groups. She still sees that, wounded boy inside of Brad Pitt, even when it's Brad Pitt.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's the thing. To her, it's one person,
Yeah,
which is
that's-
hard to kind of string together in your mind in a way. But it is behavior that is maybe contradictory, but it is at least consistently contradictory with him.
Mhm.
And she knows he's bipolar, and she has her own shit, presumably. So
Right.
maybe that's part of the appeal, is that he is wounded and has fucked up things wrong with him. And she even says ultimately, it's like, you need professional help. You are seriously fucked up, more fucked up than I can handle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so to go back to what we were saying a minute ago, about how, and to what Paul Thomas Anderson was complaining about too,
Mhm.
that this is abhorrent and everything, and that how the incels are able to take this in the wrong direction and everything. Like, I do think it's key to the movie. I don't think the movie works if Fight Club and Tyler Durden are not genuinely like persuasive in some at different points. Um, you can't get to the point where this has gone too far and that's upsetting if you were never on board to begin with.
Right. I mean,
Um,
I've seen so many movies that are about um, essentially people falling into a cult or a cult of personality developing. And
mm,
I don't see how that happened. And I love that, like, it reels me in and I'm halfway there with them before I realize how insane it is.
yeah, especially when it's something that's based on a true story or something where like that this person is a cult leader to start
Hmm.
with. Even like The Master was sort of framed as, we all knew that was about Scientology to
Yeah.
start with, and we all have our feelings on L. Ron Hubbard. You're either on the inside or the outside of that one. But if you're on the outside, like I think most of us are, then you go into that with this skepticism of Philip Seymour Hoffman that you don't have with Brad Pitt at the outset of Fight
Mm.
Club.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think it plays differently. Um, and yeah, I mean, it does allow the movie, I think, to be uh, misinterpreted in different ways, and some of them are genuinely dangerous, I guess. But it also allows the movie to ultimately make some points that are not as facile
Mm.
as either the well, IKEA doesn't care about you, man. They're just trying to get you to be another brick in the wall. Uh, like there's more, like it allows you to take a couple steps beyond that. Like realizing that that's not the be all end all is one thing, and I think most people get there some relatively earlier in their lives. Uh, and then what do you do? How do you respond to that? What do you do after that? You know, is this whole other can of worms?
I think the way that it escalates to such an absurd level is, to me, I don't understand how anybody can watch that bit, because to me the funniest stuff is when they're trying to rationalize Bob's death, and they're like,
Yeah.
he doesn't have a name. No, now that he's dead, he has a name. Let's all say it together. Like, that ridiculous behavior is hilarious to me. And I don't understand how anybody can see that and not see that they're clearly making fun of the
That's
whole
Yeah.
machine that they've created.
It was a lot funnier before QAnon came along.
Yeah.
And now we can see in real time millions of people rationalizing how like the thing that they swore yesterday
God.
because it did not pan out, and we have to come up with a whole new like set rationalization. Like, no, I get it. There's another thing here. There's another
Right.
layer that he was laying out
Mhm.
for us.
He's going to be inaugurated on March 4th as the 16th president or whatever the fuck it is. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, I
Um,
certainly have. Yeah.
that's a
Some
good one.
version of it, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that scene with Robert Paulson, aside from just that chant being like, carved into my brain forever,
Mhm.
his name is Robert Paulson. It's such a it's such a flip of the whole card kind of scene. Like it's after that, I don't know if there's any confusion about what's going on. It's like the Starship Troopers thing. Like, how do people miss this?
Yeah.
How is this
Yeah.
misunderstood what this movie is saying? It's changing one ideology for another in an extreme way. They're shaving their heads and calling themselves space monkeys and living in a basement
And
and
living in
bunks
this horrible
yeah,
building. And,
like that.
oh,
It
bruh.
doesn't look good at all.
And Norton is standing there and he's actually appalled. And he's like, how could you guys have done this? And I don't know. It seems really, really clear to me that this is not something that the film is promoting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
But Brad Pitt's V in his torso
well,
like
That
sticks in your
torso,
brain
though.
so much. Yeah, like
mhm.
it's lasted for 22 years. And
He never even been a little bit fat, that guy. Not for a role, not
Ugh.
ever.
didn't he? He bulked up for Moneyball, didn't he?
I
Did
he?
every now and again, he's a little bit thicker, but it's
Less carved,
rarely.
perhaps.
Yeah, it's just a relaxed version of the same beautiful man.
I don't know how he does it. Because does he just never eat when the camera's not on?
Oh no, he's probably just one of those freaks of nature.
Got to be.
Well, it helps if you're a freak of nature and can afford professionals to
Absolutely.
sculpt your body.
Like in the Polinick book, would you say it comes across as clearly that Project Mayhem is ultimately a cult and with as dehumanizing as any IKEA catalog could ever be? More so, I don't know. Polinick feels a little bit more an anarchist. Like it clearly gets out of control in the book. I think they actually cut his balls off, if I recall. But it's almost sort of like, well, that's the price of pushing back. I think it's a little bit more clear in the movie, which might just be, it's a movie, that they want a large audience to see.
I mean, I can't say just because I haven't read the book in 20 years and now it's been totally subsumed by the movie.
Yeah, well,
I remember the difference in the ending, but that's about it.
From what I can remember, a long, long, long time ago when I was reading the book and reading interviews with him, he definitely he's interested in I don't know, exploring toxic masculinity for sure. I don't think he's promoting it at all. I don't think he's also a gay man, so I think he probably has a very specific view of this kind of toxic masculinity. I think more than anything, he doesn't want to answer questions.
Yeah, he doesn't like to.
He doesn't want to
Yeah.
give you a message and say, "Here it is."
And that's consistent with the books for sure.
Yeah,
they're all challenging. That's he kind of likes to go hot button and and kind of poke you in your biases and figure that stuff out, and works better sometimes than others. But well, like the term snowflake originates here in Fight Club, for example.
I mean, it sort of originates here. It's in the same mocking way that it's used now, but it's referencing the same, I think, idea that was there before the 90s. That every snowflake was special and so forth. Like that, I heard as a kid. But yeah, it does. This certainly brought that to a. I don't know that snowflake means what it does now if it's not for this movie.
I don't even. It's lost its meaning at this point.
Yeah, one of those things. All right.
Yeah.
It stopped actually in the current parlance. It doesn't even mean unique anymore. It just means fragile.
That's true. Yeah. Language evolves. All right.
It does. There is so. If we can wrap this around to David Fincher at some point, we have hardly mentioned him at all in all this, which I think actually this is, yeah. Well, we came to this series after doing the Quentin Tarantino series, and there it's like all we talked about was Tarantino because he's this overwhelming personality that every frame of his movies is overflowing with his personality, and you can't say that of Fincher. He's more removed.
He's got a voice though. He's definitely got. Yeah.
I don't think he's removed. I think he is very, very present.
Well,
in all
relative
of
to
his
Tarantino.
movies. Right. I think that the difference is a little bit in perhaps the writing, because like Quentin Tarantino's voice is in the words, whereas I would say Fincher's voice is in the visuals.
Yeah. That
Well, he
makes sense.
doesn't
And
write
he's
his
not.
own stuff generally. Like,
Yeah, or
Right.
he doesn't write it by himself ever. Like, I mean, this is an adaptation. Alien 3 was a franchise thing. He didn't write 7 or he might have rewritten the game.
I don't know if he's actually got writing credits on
I have no idea.
any of his films.
But he
Yeah.
keeps doing adaptations after this,
Yeah, for the most
and
part, yeah.
so he's comfortable with that. And
Yeah, I think they're either all adaptations or based on real life, right? Social Network, Zodiac.
well,
But
Social Network is both based on real life and an adaptation of a book about
oh,
those events.
I
Although I don't know if I haven't read that book. I don't know if it's even like close at all.
it's intriguing that like he doesn't seem to, he has topics he returns to, I would say, but I feel like with him, what the big appeal is kind of the act of adaptation itself, or
Mhm.
like finding a cinematic way to tell this story. Like, what is the way to really enhance what's on the page here, what this story is about. He's really good at finding that, and he takes challenging material for sure, stuff with a dark edge, stuff that says something that touches on darker parts of humanity, and that's why Benjamin Button is such a poor fit for him, for example. But stuff like Social Network has a sort of a parody with this or Seven, just in
Yeah.
that it's about where the ugliness that drives people, and
And
brings an
also
incredible amount of technical craft to it. Yeah.
beta males creating really, really
Yes.
Yeah, maybe Social Network.
devastatingly
Social Network
catastrophic.
might be an interesting like thing to look back on this in relation to, because one of the other things about this movie, I think, is that and sort of what it got right and wrong about incels is it sort of diagnosed the disease of incels, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it's such a pre-internet movie,
Yeah.
and
Right.
we didn't see Project Mayhem develop until after everybody was online, and then it took this very different form, like almost on the other side of the political spectrum entirely, almost.
Yeah.
And another thing that he does is serial killer films, lots of them, which is
Mm.
another way of men who feel weak taking power.
Yeah,
That's
But not just men.
in Fincher movies, it's men.
Well, in Gone Girl.
Okay,
and
yes, you're right.
Dragon
Gone Girl.
Tattoo, isn't she sort of on a revenge kick again?
Oh, Gone Girl is about a man serial killer. The book that was based on was originally called Men Who Hate Women.
Wait, which?
Yeah, the girl with the dragon tattoo's original title was Men Who Hate Women.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? I did not know that.
Yeah, that's very much what we're talking about here. It'll fit right in. Zodiac's like that. Seven's like that. Yeah, it's this is a theme is emerging here, I would say.
Well, so there's something I wanted to get across. I saw an interview with Fincher where he talked about making this movie and how there was sort of like two different ways of doing it, or at least how he sold it to the studio. He said, "This is obviously not a very commercial project. It's, I mean, explicitly anti-commercial in a lot of ways, and so you could do this as like an art house indie movie for like $3 million with no names and whatever, and it's anti-consumerist strike against the man, or whatever, and that probably makes no splash whatsoever. But the way he framed it was, but the really subversive way of doing this is get $50 million from a studio, put the biggest movie stars in the world in it, and then throw all this anti-consumerist uh, screeds at them, like with using their own money to put this all up there, and that's in some way the bigger act of subversion.
Yes, if this film ultimately is, I mean, would you say anti-consumerist? I mean, I guess it is. It's
I
a
would say it
satire
is.
of consumerism,
Mhm.
but again, that's the stuff that Tyler Durden is right about, and
Mhm.
ultimately where the film lands is like, oh, not too much of that, Tyler. You know, like
Yeah, it's ultimately like
Yes, and maybe
anti-anarchist.
no.
yeah. I mean,
It's like, but the level of like conservatism that he comes around to in the end is like settling down with a girl and like a nuclear family thing. It's not like going back to IKEA.
Right. I would
It's like,
say it's suggesting that there is a middle lane that one could choose between being just sort of an IKEA automaton and Project Mayhem. They did also put a lot into the marketing of this. Like, I remember in the commentary they were talking about how they created a whole catalog for Fight Club of like the things you could buy from the movie, and like making it super super splashy and super super commercial as sort of a joke to get people interested. And then like, I
IKEA
don't
did
know.
this.
No.
Oh, sorry.
For the release of the movie, they created a Fight Club catalog with stuff from the film. And then the DVD itself. I don't know if you guys have the DVD, but
Oh yes, I know. You talk about the FBI warning.
yeah, I mean the FBI warning, but also like it's just a super fun package, and there's
one of the
so
best
much
DVDs ever.
in there. Yeah.
The I believe that has the one of the TV spots they released for it, like a 15-second TV spot. One of my all-time favorites, which is it was literally just Brad Pitt looking at the camera, and he just says, "Did you know urine is sterile? You can drink it." Fight Club. That's
Yeah, there's stuff. I mean, you know what? There's a lot of funny little stuff in this too. That like the DVD, I think stuff like the FBI warning plays into this, and I'm assuming in their catalog they probably had a lot of like descriptions in the fine print that read like they'd been written by a member of Project Mayhem.
Right.
yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff that's like goes by pretty quickly in the movie, but it's funny. Like I said earlier, I thought picking the fight with the priest was the funniest part, but I actually think the funniest part, now I think about it, is when you see one of the Project Man people putting a replacement like safety brochure into the airline pocket, where it's like a grown
Whether
man pushing a child away while he hogs the oxygen mask. That cartoon is hysterical to me. But then there's also the thing like they're when they're in the mischief phase of Project Mayhem, they are redoing the billboard, and it says like, "Did you know you can use old motor oil to fertilize your lawn?" And it's like that's clearly a prank or whatever, but it's also like pretty early on, and this is not a oh like let's all be agrarian, you know, anti-capitalist people. Like it's already like turning there. Like they're trolling. They're not like bringing down the system. Like not true anarchists that want to live in a reimagined society. Like that is just harmful to everyone.
That's true. That's pre-internet trolling. That's
Yeah.
that's great. That's exactly what they would do. So
Yeah.
there are many moments in this film that have kind of just infected my thinking forever, and I didn't even realize, like, oh god, I can directly attribute that to Fight Club. The airline safety cards, for example, that I think of that every time I'm in an airplane. The one that really struck me is do I give you the ass or the crotch as I pass by?
Mhm.
I think that literally every time I'm moving past somebody on on a seat now.
Yeah, 20 years later, I still have not answered that question to my satisfaction.
Yeah, I think crotch is better in most cases, but
Oh no, I think the opposite.
really,
Well, crotch feels like a power move, like you're trying to look him in the eye while you're doing it. I mean, the worst is ass while looking over your shoulder at them. But we're not doing that.
but yeah,
not
but
that's
monsters.
exactly how I do it every time. Is that not? No?
Well, you're a monster, Gwen. I mean,
but yeah, that's the thing that's just in my head now forever. You know, and there's a lot of that stuff in Fight Club. That it's all little social stuff like that. The you know, are the airbags that pop out from the airline giving us O2 to make us docile as we perish? You know, little questions that I'm now going to ponder because of Fight Club. I mean, Chuck Palahniuk books are kind of full of those, actually. Yeah.
they're better for like individual paragraphs and thoughts and
Oh
lines
yes.
than they are for well-rounded characters or uh, coherent plot arcs.
Yeah, but they're great for those individual paragraphs.
Yeah,
Um,
he was a
all right.
blogger who just wrote novels because blogs hadn't been invented yet.
I mean, I feel like this is a movie we could literally talk about for hours because there's
Yeah,
just
I
so
mean,
much in it.
there's so much in it. We didn't get that deep into Fincher.
No, we kind of ignored him for most of the time.
I mean, he just did a great job here. Like
He did
he
such a
did
great job.
he did a hell of a film that moves incredibly fast, that has a really coherent thematic idea that is funny and entertaining, and a lot of challenging things that make perfect sense in the context of this. He pulls off a great twist, and that enhances the film when you see it again. Everything makes more sense.
Well, I would say it's shockingly coherent,
Yeah.
considering that I don't, reading this book, I think it would be very hard. You wouldn't go, oh yeah, that's a movie. Like,
No.
and I think they
No.
struggled with how to make it a movie, but they massaged it into this form where it does like seems it flows through those like jumps every 50 pages into this new wild turn. But it does enough to like tie things back to what they've come before, and the narration. Another thing I said earlier, like that the multiple personalities is a pet peeve of mine, but this movie pulls it off. Um, Another thing that's supposed to be a big problem in movies is excessive narration is supposed to be a crutch and a weakness, but I don't think you can do this movie without it.
You can't do
Uh,
this movie without
It,
and it's edited so well. I think is
oh
part of what
yeah,
makes the narration really fantastic. The way it pops into moments. Oh, it's beautiful.
there's so much, like, there's multiple instances of direct address in this film. Like
mm-hmm.
people look at the camera and talk to you directly, and you barely even notice them. Like
Right.
usually that takes you right out and fucks up everything. But I mean, it's established early on that he can do that, that anyone can do that, really, I guess.
Well,
The two of them. And
one thing like that you don't notice in the initial view that I didn't notice until this time actually, that now that I have movie twist brain, I guess it should be a dead giveaway. But the fact that partway through the movie, Tyler starts direct addressing the camera too, which is something only the
Mm-hmm.
narrator has ever been able to do, and nobody else will ever be able to do. Marla is never going to be able to direct address to the camera. Bob's not going to do that. But once they're hanging out together, living together, suddenly they start tag teaming those direct addresses.
yeah, turns out it's a clue.
And yeah,
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I in general, I would say, and I'm guessing that this is like going to become a theme as you continue to unpack Fincher films, is like he is notorious for being OCD and like so detail oriented. And I think if every single teeny tiny detail of that movie weren't packed the way it is, I don't think any of it would work. The narration or the direct address or the entire conceit of the split personality.
I don't know if it was, but this movie should have been nominated for costume design
Well, it should have been nominated for a great many things. I don't think it was up for anything.
and editing. Yeah,
This didn't do well when it came out. It was like a modest hit at best. Not even that, really. I think it might have lost money. It ultimately kind of did a Shawshank Redemption thing, and everyone realized, oh no, that was a great film. We all missed that one.
yeah. Well,
And
it's
it
I mean, it was sort of destined to be a cult movie because it's about a cult. And it's about a cult of people that had exactly the type of people that had disposable income to buy DVDs in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I'm sure Suncoast Video sold a hell of a lot of Fight Clubs.
Mm-hmm. And posters, that where he's holding the bar of soap, that was in a lot of dorm rooms.
It really
Did
was.
I have a Fight Club poster? I might as well have. Yeah, this was a big one. This was a big one when I was a kid. When I went to college. This was a huge foundational film. Not just in the Helena Bonham Carter way, in just an understanding of what cinema is capable of, and and what a movie can be, and how storytelling can work. It's I mean, yeah, like we've been talking about how great a lot of this stuff is, but I do want to underline, I think this is a genius film and just an exceptional piece of work. And there's other films that Fincher's made that could arguably be called masterpieces, but it's going to be hard for me to find one that is going to top this as we go through these, I think.
I would say, like, I completely agree with you. I also think, like, I just to go back to the very beginning of our conversation, that, like, this is a situation that would only happen to a white man. Like, I do think it's interesting to sort of ask yourself, like, how privileged is it that, like, the only way you can access your pain is to go to a basement and, like, beat each other up and blow up your apartment. Like, yeah, I think that's the one criticism I could give this, that, like, it just is overlooking its massive privilege.
That's what I was saying about Sorry to Bother You as a counterpoint early on, is that it addresses a lot of the same issues from a totally different perspective.
The opposite angle, yeah.
And what I would say, again, we all start this conversation off by saying, is this the whitest man movie that's ever white man? And I think it might be, but I don't hold that against us in the way that you can against some other movies, where it's
what it's about.
Yeah, I don't think it's unexamined exactly.
Right. And I think the whole point of the movie is to point out how dangerous white men can be.
Very much.
Yes, it's critical of that.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can do that. I mean, even with women we talked about earlier, but I don't know that I don't think there's a way to really incorporate minority viewpoints into Fight Club and still have the movie.
It's The Big Short kind of thing. It's a movie that is about white malehood, and
right.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think like that it's more pernicious when the, like, white male centricity of things is, like, unexamined in movies where that's, like superhero movies or whatever, or the, like, action movies where it's not central to the thing. But this is about specifically, like, white men in their 20s and 30s in the 90s. Like, I don't know how you remake this movie for 2021. Like, again, which is, once the internet comes around, everything's so changed.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, the I don't want to counterpoint, I guess. I think in support of that, though, in a way, I do believe that this film does kind of show privilege as a double-edged sword to some extent. Because these guys have a feeling of entitlement, but that feeling is not met. That feeling is not matched by the world. They are, like I said, they're going to be movie stars and underwear models or whatever, and they're not. None of them are. Like they are disappointed.
That's the incel angle.
Internally. Yes.
Right.
Like
they feel they were promised something that was not delivered.
Yeah, like it's not going to live up to it. They're angry, and they don't really have a way to express that anger. Because they've been set up to behave in a certain way.
Has told men that they're not allowed to just cry in each other's arms unless they had lost their balls to testicular cancer.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's that anger kind of foments as a result of, not getting what you would hope for and having no way to deal with that, proscribed by the society that promised you the thing. So I think that is all part of the cake. It's one piece of the recipe here.
Yeah.
And,
it's about the dangers of that. So if you included other viewpoints into that, it would diffuse it in a way where I think you would just be checked out earlier on. If you had it would be, if you punctured this balloon earlier on, then it just wouldn't. Everything would be different. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work anywhere near in the same way that it does currently.
If it could potentially maybe have benefited from, like, just a little more feedback at the end of the movie from sane people,
I mean, it might have underlined the thing in a way you get it, but then probably wouldn't have, because if you don't get it by Robert Paulson, you're not getting it. Maybe because you're in the throes of exactly what the movie's talking about.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, again, QAnon. Here's all the evidence that you need to dismiss a lot of these ideas. And it's like, no. We're going to move to the next date. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so to tie this back to another movie I mentioned earlier, which was Taxi Driver, one of the things I heard somebody say, I think it was actually Tarantino was talking about Taxi Driver recently, and said he called it the best first person character study that film had ever produced. And I think that's sort of the key here. I mean, Fight Club's sort of that too. It's a first person character study, and it's if you puncture that first person perspective, then it kind of falls apart. And so if you're going to do, if that character is going to be a white guy, it's going to be all about the dangers of being an angry white guy. Then yeah, I don't know how to include an Asian American perspective into that in a productive way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't want to change anything about this, but I mean, there's things that this movie kind of forces you to be like to acknowledge. I
Yes.
guess that'd be a way to put it. It's this is about the white man experience, for better or worse, and especially the one kind of left to its own devices.
So maybe it's not the most white man movie ever, but it's one of the best white man movies ever.
I think the best white man movie is probably. That's a way of putting it. Yeah.
It's a strange category, guys.
Yeah. Well, all right.
All right. What else? Edward Norton's really good. We talked about how good everyone else was. He's great in this too. It's the best thing he's ever done, probably. He's
That's
wonderful.
true.
I think he's a very talented person.
Yeah.
Oh, he definitely is.
Clearly.
Yeah.
This is my favorite role of his, I would say.
Yep. Easily in my book. I think he's been great in other stuff, but definitely
Primal Fear.
He's good in it. I mean, that's a sillier character. I think
it sure is.
There's also a very real possibility this is the best thing Jared Leto ever did.
Oh, I'll go with that.
That's probably true.
I mean, it's just because the bar is otherwise set pretty low.
Yeah,
wait, isn't he in Panic Room?
Yeah.
We'll find out next week.
That one.
You
will.
We're about to check that out. Yeah.
Have fun with that.
Yeah.
As I recall, Dwight Yoakam and Forrest Whitaker. Is that right?
Forrest Whitaker, Dwight Yoakam, and Jared Leto. Yes, that's the team.
Okay.
Right.
There's not a ton of actors that Fincher works with like multiple times, aside from Brad Pitt. But
McElhaney.
Jared Leto, he couldn't let go of that guy.
Well, he does after
Panic Room. Does he show up again somewhere? I'm trying to.
I believe that's the end of it. Leto. He's going to get an Oscar nomination this year, and it's going to suck.
What is he getting nominated for?
I think I want to
Little
see
things. I watched it. It's bad. Don't watch it.
Oh.
It's kind of like Seven, honestly. It's like a bad.
Yeah, I think you told me. You also told me in the game one not to watch Little Things.
I think I cut that out ultimately, but yes, don't watch
it.
But every now and then you hate a movie and I love it, and vice versa. So who knows?
Yeah, maybe you'll like Little Things. I don't think you will, though.
You'd be the first, as far as I've known.
All right. Let's see.
Thank you, Gwen.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're good, right? We're good. We did it.
We did it. Oh, we didn't ask each other. Who would you fight if you could fight anyone?
Good question.
Celebrity or historical figure?
Anyone. Let's say.
Trick question. Donald Trump both ways.
Oh, that's a good answer.
It's the obvious answer. Yeah. Is it not? Yeah.
It's also, I'm not very confident I'm not in fighting shape right now after a year of quarantine, which, by the way, thanks Donald Trump.
I think I could take Tommy Lauren.
Oh, wow.
I could fuck her up.
That's good. Yeah, one of them folks would be fun. Tucker'd be, I don't know. He could.
But so I think we're going to a different question here, though. You're asking who would you like to beat up, not versus who would you like to fight to challenge yourself, which I think is what they were asking themselves when they're talking about Shatner.
Well, yes and no. I think like Shatner and Lincoln, like those are symbols of manhood to some extent. Mm-hmm. But the fact that like the first time they ask that question, they say dad and boss. Like says so much about men white men in the 90s are just so mad.
Mad their daddies.
Great. Yeah.
Sorry, one thing we did not mention, I would like to throw out Zach Grenier as the boss. Great performance also.
Agreed.
Underrated
Yeah.
character actor.
Yeah,
Okay.
he really sticks out. And read an interesting thing about Edward Norton was saying like why people didn't like the movie, you know, why it wasn't successful. And he's like, I think anyone who kind of relates to the boss character probably hates this film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone who's bought
Well,
into the system.
yeah, I mean, I relate to him just because, holy shit, what a terrible thing to have to deal with. That guy, this guy. I mean, I also feel bad for Marla for having to deal with this guy.
Yeah, Marla gets it the worst probably.
Poor Mark.
But to answer the question about who do we want to fight, I think John and I had the same response, which is, you know what, we're married men now. We don't have the type of anger where we're.
Yeah, we're above it. Yeah.
I don't sit around fantasizing about the people I could fight now. Now I look back on my life and think about fantasize about the people I could apologize to.
Yeah. Mostly just stew on regrets. Really, that's the new cool thing to
Like,
do.
if I could find that person and then do it privately in a way that they couldn't like just immediately throw it on Twitter or something to embarrass me.
Wow.
Like, that would be great.
I think that shows that we've evolved, guys. Good job.
Or perhaps just aged.
That's what. Yeah.
All right, that's it. Calling it.
All right.
All right. Yeah. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you, guys.
All right.
Insert penis shot.
Insert
Just so.
the penis shot.